Well, I think growing up in Zanzibar, which is in a way a concentrated cosmopolitan society.
This series of presentation is part of the Awakening project.
And at that time then I joined here, it was in government Indian junior school.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Learning from Our History series. This series of presentations is part of the Awakening project for the Khoja Shia Ithna-asheri Muslim community. The Awakening project is a worldwide grassroots-orientated project that seeks participation and reform from community members themselves. More details are available on the website. The objectives of Learning from Our History series is to understand our community history and learn from it so as to chart out the destiny of our community for the better. As an important part of this series is to engage in conversation with personalities from our community about their own life experiences as well as issues that they consider important and or life-changing for the community. Today we have with us Alhaj Mohamedbhai Abdulla Khalfan. He was born in Mombasa. After obtaining his primary and secondary education, Mohammedbhai set for overseas Matriculation Examination of London in 1951. In 1951 in Zanzibar to study medicine. Although one of the 6 successful candidates out of 32, the family changed its mind of sending him abroad and developed his talents in East Africa. In occupation, he has a long experiences in real estates, particularly sales, transfers, and mortgage securities. He has considerable experience in drawing up of legal agreements. The Tanzanian government nominated him on a committee that review and recommend changes in the Rents Restriction Act. He was assistant judge that assisted judges in judgment of cases of property disputes. Mohammedbhai assisted Shura, that is a Muslim representing body, in preparing representations on issues like marriages, divorce, inheritance, waqf, before parliamentary, legal, and constitutional committees. In 1990, Mohammedbhai was the vice chairman of Africa Federation and assisted and contributed in drawing up the constitutions of the World Federation of Khoja Shia Ithna-asheri Muslim community. He was the recipient of Huseini Medal from Africa Federation in appreciation of his long services to our community in Africa from when he was a councillor at age 26. Welcome, Mohammedbhai, to IBN TV. Mohammedbhai, mashallah, you have a distinguished history of services both to the community and outside of it. From the age 26 or from age 20? I wasn't sure. Was it age 26 or age 20?
It started in Zanzibar.
Yeah.
When I was just in my 20s.
On 20s, yes. So what I want to begin by asking you is how much role your parents played in the early upbringing to set you to such a distinguished path of honorary services. So can you explain briefly what you remember of your birthplace, your childhood impression, your father and mother, and family life, and then sort of wrap it up with the madrasa and secondary education and occupation that you held. So it's quite a lot to cover, but if we begin a conversation with your birthplace and then your family life and then your parents. So if you can go like that. So you start, Mohammedbhai.
I was born in Mombasa because the family had industries there, coconut oil and soap making industries, and we also had coconut plantations.
This is in Mombasa?
In Mombasa. Mm-hmm. So that is where I was born. And then we moved to Zanzibar.
Why Zanzibar from Mombasa?
We moved to Zanzibar because we also had soap industry, coconut oil industry in Zanzibar also.
All right, okay.
Mm. And we found that too much coconut.
Yeah.
was from Mombasa Island, from Zanzibar Island and Pemba Island. So we moved to Zanzibar and concentrated in industry in Zanzibar.
Okay, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
And as regards my parents, my father died at the age of 91.
MashaAllah.
In Dar es Salaam. And by the grace of Allah, he was mentally sharp. Even at the time when he was on his last year of his life.
Can I ask you about your father? Which part of, presumably he came from India, which part of Gujarat would he have come from then?
We came from Jamnagar.
Right, so you are Kathiawadi in that sense.
Yes, we came from Jamnagar, and the person whose name we still use as our surname, Khalfan.
Right.
He arrived in Lamu in 1835.
1835?
1835.
And he was Ismaili, Ithna-asheri,
He was
Hindu?
At that time he was Ithna-asheri.
He was Ithna-asheri in 1835?
1835.
Oh, I must learn more from you afterwards, after the interview. Okay.
He was, even the name, you see, even the name itself suggests, Khalfan, that it was more Islamic than of the other mainstream community.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And even we wonder is how in 1835 this person whose age was 20 when he came to Lamu, how he had this name of Khalfan. We ourselves don't know.
But he was a Khoja.
But he was a Khoja. We were Khoja.
Right, right.
And
so, yeah, go on.
And my grandfather was born in Zanzibar in 1860. My father in Zanzibar 1889. So throughout we have been in East Africa.
And also Ithna-asheri then?
And
this generation, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We actually we declared our faith as Ithna-asheri in 1880.
1808.
1880.
1808.
1880.
Oh, 1880 you declared.
We declared.
Yeah, okay.
Because you see, we had relatives. For example, you see, the Mukis of that time in Jamaat Khana were the uncles, the maternal uncles of my grandfather.
Okay.
So we had both the connections. So what happened was in 1889 my father was born. As for my father, as I said, came from Jamnagar. Now my mother, while my father lived up to the age of 91, my mother died very young.
How come? What was the reason?
Bled to death.
Oh.
Just bled to death. And she knew she was dying. And my age was only 12 years at that time. And I also knew that she was going to die.
Also knew?
That she was going to die. You see what happened? After bearing 3 children, then my mother, she died at the age of 32. My mother developed the weakness of uterus where she would have 2 miscarriages every year. Followed, each miscarriage would be followed by bleeding. And there came a time when the last miscarriage, when she was still alive, was not going to stop. And our doctor, he was a European doctor, Dr. Taylor. He also lost hope. But then, by the grace of Allah, the bleeding stopped. And before she went unconscious, the bleeding stopped. So she survived. Now at that time, the doctor, this Dr. Taylor, told my father to start using contraceptives, and warned that if he did not use contraceptives, the next miscarriage would be her last one.
Oh.
So my father consulted ulama, and ulama said it was haram, it was prohibited to use contraceptives, even at the risk of life. But my father said he would use contraceptive, but my mother said no, she would rather die without committing the sin of the prohibition of contraceptive at that time. And she knew that she was going to die. And this happened in Mina.
Okay.
This happened in Mina, where she died and was buried in Mina.
So mother is buried in Mina.
Buried in Mina, you see, because she knew that she was not going to live long, and thought that they should perform Hajj at that time. But now, many lives now are saved, alhamdulillah, because there is the wisdom of modernity in matter of science and knowledge. So contraceptives are allowed. You see, the Arabs, even during the Prophet time, the Arabs were using contraceptives for the camel, so that when the camel went on a caravan, taking 3-4 months, they should not be pregnant. So they would put pebble. They would insert pebble into their uterus.
Mohammedbhai, if I may stop, I'm surprised that the ulama had come to that decision, because my understanding of contraceptive history in Islam was that contraceptive was allowed even during the Prophet's time. So it's a very unusual and sad.
Not only that, one of the sayings of Hazrat Ali alayhi salam says, one of the convenience of life is to have less children. To have less children.
Yeah.
Imagine.
So you can relate it to contraceptive there. Yeah. Anyway, can we sort of move on to your secular education? Oh, yeah, this is your parents' side. So what is your experiences as you grew up? The ethos around as you did your primary madrasa education, primary education, secondary education, briefly, if we can just do that to wrap this part of the conversation.
Yes. I feel, you see, the whole credit goes to my mother, that even before I entered madrasa, she started teaching me how to read the Quran, because she came from the family of Devji Jamal.
Okay. Devji Jamal is quite a prominent personality in the development of our community. Yeah.
She was the granddaughter of Devji Jamal. She was the daughter of Jafar Devji Jamal. And when she married, she already knew all the du'as, especially Dua Kumel. She would teach me how to read Dua Kumel even before I had entered the madrasa.
Mashallah.
You see, I remember she knew it by heart, by memory, as I would read slowly, stuttering, and she would be stitching, knitting.
Yeah, that would stop.
Knitting, and would correct me.
Right, as she is knitting.
As she was knitting, she would correct me.
Yeah.
And my reading, it would take me 30-40 minutes.
to do that, yeah.
You see, so you'll find, I always believe that today, if by the grace of Allah, I am more Quran oriented, I am more Tawheed oriented, she gave me something which was a springboard for me.
For you too, yeah. Okay. So what about the secular, primary and secondary? Is there anything you can relate to us, an event that is special?
Yes, it was just the normal, like every other community boys would go to primary school.
So there's nothing special.
And then secondary school.
Right, okay.
And then the only thing was, you see, my disappointment was because I had prepared myself to go to UK for medicine.
Yes.
And I got entrance by being successful in the overseas London Matriculation Examination. And I was lucky to be one of those 6. But my parents refused, my father refused, because there was that parent protective culture. 70 years ago, London, to my father, may have seemed like I was talking about a place in another planet.
How? That's far.
70 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. In an article, Mohammedbhai, that was published 4 or 5 years back in Federation Samachar, that's the official journal of Africa Federation. In the editor, the then editor, I think it was, who was the editor at the time?
Munir Daya.
Munir Daya, that's right. He introduced you as a leader, a thinker, and a writer. Now this is an interesting title. Why a leader, a thinker, and a writer? Can you expand on each of these so that we can have a better understanding of why he introduced you like that?
If I had known
that
he was going to introduce me in the title of my profile as the leader, thinker, and writer, I would have objected.
Oh, why?
You see, it seemed out of dream, you know.
So you didn't know about this?
At that time, I didn't know that he could be able to glean all those things by interviewing me, which of course took about 2 hours.
All right.
So, but now, then I had to say what was the truth. For example, in the case of, he said leader. In the case of leader, I kept leading even when I was in primary school in the matter of sports to other children.
So you were interested in sports?
Yes, in sports. In sports, you see, at the age of 20, I became the secretary of Isnashi Gymkhana, the players. And we were champions in Zanzibar, always in sports. And then we had that competition. Isnashi team from Dar es Salaam, from Mombasa, would come to Zanzibar to have. And there, I suggested that we form East African Ithna-asheri Sports Association, and we did that so that we could rotate then the visit to Mombasa and also to Dar es Salaam. So that initiatives, by the grace of God, I always held. For example, in Zanzibar, the Arabs were the landlords.
Arabs were the?
Many landlords.
Right.
You see, even the plantations, they were the owner, the buildings, and the tenants were being sort of not having a good deal. At the age of 23, I helped in forming Zanzibar Tenants Association.
What was the year then? 19?
It was 1930. I have it here. Zanzibar tenants. 1955.
Okay, so since then, all right.
At the age of 23, assisted in forming tenants, Zanzibar Tenants Association. And I argued there. They were Asians, they were all Indians, Ithna-asheris. At that meeting held in Aga Khan School Hall. And many would not even speak, would not talk out because of fear. Because you see, even the government was the Arab Sultanate government, you see. But I stood and I said...
So you made the representations there?
Yes. So I said, we must. And if we do it, then we can contact the government, because it was colonial government, and get our rights as tenants protected. Even though my family was landlord, you see, but then I tried to assist. And then it was agreed that, it should be formed, and as the constitution should be framed, and I was elected as the secretary at the age of 23 of Zanzibar Tenants Association. So that as a leader, then Daslam Jamaat.
Yeah.
In Daslam Jamaat, I became secretary.
Youngest secretary, if I'm not mistaken.
The youngest secretary ever.
In the history of the Islam.
Yeah, up to now.
Yeah.
At the time when all the committee members and office holders were people, very old people, as a tradition, elderly people. And then...
Did you learn from them? Quite a lot? Or?
I learned from the chairman who was there, Nasser Nur Muhammad.
All right. Okay.
Oh yes, I learned, you see. Because at that time, Dasla Jamaat did not have the post of vice chairman. It
Unusual,
was vice president.
Yeah.
It was president. Now our president, Mr. Nur Muhammad Nasser, unfortunately he was a heart patient. So sometimes he would not come attend the meeting. So I would chair the meeting, because we didn't have...
So at the age of 23, you were chairing the meeting?
26.
26, yeah.
Because at that time we didn't have that position of vice chairman. And I would chair, and during my chairmanship, in 2-3 meetings, we took over the control of Mahfil Abbas.
Yes, that institution, Mahfil Abbas, has a very interesting history, isn't it, of its own?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you know, we had no objections, because the property belonged to the trustees of the Jamaat, and the functions were regular. But at a general meeting, when we wanted to adopt our accounts, one of the elder stood up, and I was the secretary of the Daslam Jamaat, stood up. He said, why the revenue and the expenses of the Mahfil Abbas was not in the accounts? And that started the controversy, that there was much more money was pouring into the till of Mahfil Abbas than even to the Jamaat.
Oh.
And then the ornaments that was being bestowed to the Zari were a lot of ornaments. And we came to know only when we took over, and we found, and I arranged a photograph to be taken of all those ornaments. It was a largest, like we could say. Anyway, that is
eventually Mahfil Abbas became part of the authority of Jamaat, became the final authority.
Yes, yeah. But my ambition, my idea was, because I thought the control should remain with the lady. The only thing, she should provide accounts in any form, we would trust her even if she was to show that it was a zero revenue, so long as the accounts are accommodated in our main accounts.
Right.
That was the idea.
Okay.
But it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, I saw the booklet that was published by the Islam Jamaat on the Mehdi Abbas issue.
Yes.
Yeah. And your correspondences as well. So that's the, well, what about the, you then went on to become the vice chairman of Africa Federation?
Yes, I became vice chairman. Habib Mulji came to me with the, who was there? Rafiq Somji came to me and said that Habib was taking over as now chairmanship of Africa Federation Jamaat from Dirani, is completing 2 terms, and Rafiq Somji would become vice chairman.
Yeah.
And I should be the secretary. I said no, I would not become the secretary because that is too much, and I was very busy because I had started also some another business at that time. Then they said, how about vice chairman and Rafiq becomes the secretary? I said, even that vice chairman I would not have time. But then during the tenure of vice chairman, Rafiq died. So Habib came to me again pleading now. He said, you see, Rafiq was the biggest support. He died and I should not let him down. So then I agreed to become vice chairman, but on condition, during only his first term. Because during the second term, if I were to become vice chairman, and if there is going to be any contestant,
you become a leader.
I would become, and I refused. So in the second term of Habib, I became a trustee, and left with somebody. And that thing did arise again, that I should now, because there was nobody, everybody expected me to become the new chairman, and there was no contest. So I refused. Instead, we had to again ask Muhammad Dirani to come over again to take over as a new chairman, because I would not do it. Now the question why I did not.
We'll come to that eventually. We'll come to that because I've got so many other things to ask you.
Yes.
And so I want to cover quite a lot. But just briefly, because I met you in 1990 Constitutional Conference of the World Federation, where you were a heavy contributor on the construction of the Constitution of the World Federation. And I was very impressed, by the way, of your contribution. At the time, I still remember is you coined it hierarchy of our institution. You know, they have a hierarchy, Jamaat, regional, we mustn't break it, and that was the philosophy you put forward. And of course your contribution on the preamble of the World Federation. Do you want to very briefly share about that, or shall we leave it on the preamble? Because I've got so many other things to ask you.
On the preamble, the thing that pleased me is that it said that this organization would be driven by the commitment to Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. But lately, then I found that it is not the sugar that sweetens the tea, it is the stirring. You get the point?
Yes, I get the point, and I think we can discuss it after the. But now you've talked a bit about leader. What about a thinker? And I have also got a writer to go through. So if we can do a thinker bit and a writer bit.
Yes. Now about the thinker.
Yeah.
In fact, everybody thinks. There's no exception. But the blessing of Allah is when the thoughts are translated into actions.
That's right. Yeah.
and results. Now, I'll list out what were the results of my thoughts. I established JIDA. JIDA,
yes, that's right, yeah. Go on.
JIDA is the short name of Jafari Initiatives Dar es Salaam Limited. It is a non-profit making organization of the community. And the purpose is, while Jamaat is having welfare assistance, there are much more families in the community who are hand to mouth. They operate their household expenses on a very tight budget. Very tight budget. In the event of unforeseen expenses, substances, incurring expenses, they don't know where to go. And they are people with a pride, family pride.
Yes.
So I thought that we should have an organization now so that it should be Qarz-e Hasanat, but we wouldn't tell them it is Qarz-e Hasanat. And we should start giving the people who need it. For example, in the event of emergency medical expenses, suddenly a mother becomes sick, and a mother would not tell the children that she was sick, knowing that the family has got no money.
Oh.
That's happened.
Right.
Knowing that the family has no money because she knows about how things go on a tight budget.
Sure.
And now if she were to tell the son that she was having some problem, and the son would insist on going to the doctor, and the doctor will ask for a series of tests, and the test would cost almost 20% of their monthly income. Where would they get it from?
Sure.
It may be a shop, small shop. It may be employment. Or sometime the water system collapses.
So this is where this organization would come and intervene and help them.
They would come. For example, confidentiality
Will be maintained.
is the key. To such an extent that if somebody comes and takes, even his children, or even his sons, even his brother, even his wife would not know. Confidentiality. Even the directors would not know. The only 2 directors out of 5 would know. The 2 who sign a check.
Right.
And there is no application. Just voucher.
Okay.
Payable, repayable by up to 12 months. And in half an hour they get the money.
So you set up this institution
Recently.
Yeah, recently.
I'll tell you, in 2013.
Right. So if we move forward to the thinking part of it, have you set up any other institutions?
Oh yes, about the thinking, there was the threat of polarization of the world, Khoja Shia Ithna-asheri world, when the World Federation election in October 2009 in Toronto.
Oh yes, yes, I remember that. Yeah.
Was challenged.
Yes.
That it was irregular. And it was irregular. And I pointed out 4 reasons why it was irregular. But then I read the charity, UK Charity Commission Act. I read out, and I found such controversy would harm the World Federation, because Charity Commissioner can appoint somebody and move in while there is a dispute, and when they move in, they have access to everything. I said, no, this is not the way. So one thing, I would never tell anybody what are those irregularities.
But you know.
But I know. And I never told anybody. Until after it was over, I told. And the second thing was that it has to come from Africa Federation as a proposal. to have a re-election, another election. But because this irregularity should not come again, so there has to be some amendments to the constitution. So it has to be from Africa Federation, and I can manage it. But Africa Federation, when they call the meeting, the Jamaat have to say this. Africa Federation on its own cannot do it. So Jamaat. So I started with Daslam Jamaat. Called a meeting at Daslam Jamaat. And I sat with the chairman, with the mic, and just said that there is going to be emergency World Federation meeting. This is going to be discussed. And our way forward should be another election. I had to argue, and I succeeded.
Okay.
And at the Africa Federation, I had to argue, and it went through.
Right.
And at the World Federation, you know, I had to argue.
Yes, I was there. Yes.
And it went through. What is very important, my services outside the community is much greater.
Okay.
And much more appreciated.
Right.
Outside the community.
Okay. So you want to very quickly go through just the list?
Yes.
All right.
For example,
Yeah.
the Tanzanian government Constitution Review Committee.
Right.
I presented papers, research papers of recommendation how Constitution should be amended, and one set I prepared for Africa Federation, and one set I prepared for Daslam Merchant Chamber.
Okay.
Where I was also a legal portfolio member in the committee. Another thing, I was a regular person on the panel of TV channel, Channel 10.
Okay. In Dar es Salaam.
Weekly. I would be there. National issues would be discussed.
Really?
I would be one of them.
MashaAllah.
And it was in English. And I was very bold in my views.
The views were about what matter, would you say?
About Tanzanian issues, national issues.
Oh, national issues.
Yes,
okay.
yes. For example, I was once I shared the panel with a judge, the top judge of the commercial court, with a senior lawyer, and I was one of the three in this TV channel. And I also was regular invitee at a breakfast meeting organized by Business Times, where even diplomats came.
Okay. So you had networking and engagement with that strata of the society.
Yes, I would speak there. I would prepare give my thoughts also. When the Muslims in the mainland said that we would need to have a Qazi court,
right,
like Zanzibar has, so Shura was asked to present recommendation
right
before the Tanzanian Parliamentary Legal and Constitutional Committee.
Right.
The Shura, representing all sects of Muslims of different races, Arab, Yemen, Indian, I was asked to prepare a presentation. So when I wrote the whole thing, the chairman of Shura then asked me to read out.
Okay.
So I read out in the Parliamentary Chamber Committee. And the actual question asked, I had to respond it.
In Swahili?
About this Qazi court. But anyway, the Christians have opposed it.
Right, okay.
Then the government, of course, appointed me to review the Zanzibar, the Rent Restriction Act.
Right.
To make recommendation what changes were there. I was the only Asian.
There, representing,
on that committee.
Yeah.
There were other lawyers. And our recommendations were adopted by the Parliament then in 1985.
Oh, mashallah.
You see? And there was another thing. This is about thinker. I was also, as you said, I was on the Commercial Court Users Committee.
Yes. Yes.
When the government agreed to establish commercial court separately because of the pressure, I was also appointed to be on the Users Committee, and I was also on the panel. And all those cases which had to do with banking and legal commercial things, I would assist the judge and give my opinion in writing and distribute to all the plaintiff and the defendant.
This side of your career, if I may say so, I wasn't aware of. It's a very interesting career you had, you know, where you are representing not only our own community, but also the wider Muslim community in making sure that their rights are preserved, or at least advocated, yeah.
You know, I had to come out from the panel because at the end, I would also have to say that the plaintiff asked for interest to be paid on the debt judgment, on the judgment debt.
Yeah.
And interest for me is, so I had to come out. Yeah. I said, no, it's not for me. Now this is for outside, and I would also, there would be also annual discussion, roundtable discussion of all judges in Tanzania and lawyers with a theme. Every year there was a theme, and I would be invited by the commercial court to be also there.
Okay.
Now as a writer maybe.
Yeah, please. If you go on to that, then
now
I can go on to other questions as well.
Now, as a writer, you know, at a very young age, I was a ghost writer.
Were you? Of what? Of who?
Editorial ghost writer for Zanzibar Times, Weekly Zanzibar Times.
Were you?
Yes.
All right. Okay. This was what year to what year? 19.
This was in, I think it was in 1952 to 1956.
Okay.
I was a ghostwriter of editorial because I knew all those national issues. You see.
Okay.
At the same time, in Zanzibar, in Dar es Salaam, I had a column.
Oh, in the national newspaper?
Newspaper.
Right. Okay.
Yes, Express magazine.
Oh yes.
Weekly.
Okay. Yeah.
Express magazine, very popular.
And what sort of topics were you writing then?
I had a column as I see it.
Oh, so, oh yes, I remember that. As I see it, and then you used to write it.
Yes, I would write. Every week I would write as I see it.
Yeah.
But my name was not be given.
Right.
As I see it, so I could speak out my heart.
Yes.
And they liked it
Which I
very
think
much.
you like. You like to speak your heart out, yeah.
Right. About the madrasa, I must tell you also one thing that I taught also in Dar es Salaam, in madrasa. I taught in secondary school also, but at the same time, I also gave lecture at the mosque after Maghribain every week. My turn came.
Right.
That every week I had a slot of giving my lecture after Maghribain.
Right.
And I would give a lecture.
Yeah, in the masjid.
In the masjid.
Yeah.
I also conducted Tadabbur al-Quran once a week, but then it didn't last because we didn't have that culture of Tadabbur al-Quran. Anyway,
yeah.
That is
we'll
history.
come to that. I've got a question on that, but as soon as you finish the writer up, we'll go on to the next question. But these are the books that you have written.
Yes.
They're a very interesting book. There's one in child psychology. You want to very briefly talk about it?
30 chapters.
Yeah.
Each chapter with episodes.
Right.
It says how to give the child from the beginning an edge in life over other children by the application of psychology, as simple but known to be so simple by the parents. For example, my first chapter is teach the child to think.
Well, very important. How
Teach
to
the
think.
child to think.
Yes.
I said.
Right. So if I can just ask you to just talk about the new revised edition of Dastan.
This Dastan
Yeah.
is a very bad story. In fact, the word Dastan means sad story. Dastan gives a varieties of aspects of poverty.
Okay.
Different type of poverty in ramifications.
That existed in our community.
In our community during
Right.
1930 to 1960
Right. That'd be interesting.
in Zanzibar.
Mm.
But there was no aid for them.
No aid.
No aid. No
So they
zakat for
suffered
them.
silently.
No zakat for them.
Right. Okay.
And I have PDF of it.
Yeah. If anyone wants it. Yeah. Time tells.
Time tells 30 chapters
Right.
with episodes. My message is that whenever you have a family issue, in the first instance it looks very ugly
Yeah.
and you want to react.
Okay.
You want to face it. That is the mistake. Think over it and you'll find it less ugly the following day.
Right.
Then you don't want to face it as an enemy.
Yeah.
You want to manage it.
Oh,
as a
very
normal.
nicely said. Very nicely said. Very nicely. That's a very good advice. And what about this make your choice now?
Now, make your choice now before death strikes
Absolutely.
any
Yeah.
moment.
Yes. Yeah.
So that when one dies,
Yeah.
dies in the state of belief
Right.
and not unbelief.
Okay.
Anybody who doesn't pay zakat to the poor,
Right.
as designed in the Quran,
Yes.
his prayers are not accepted.
Right.
And those whose prayers are not accepted, because you see, this is a link. Akimu salata wa atu zakata. Those whose prayers are not selected, they die in the state of kufr.
And if anyone wishes to know more about zakat, then they can
Yes,
contact you.
because
as well,
I'm worried. My parents did lot of charity to such an extent that they raised 2 orphan children unrelated.
yeah. Right.
2 children unrelated, raised them. So much compassionate they were,
Yeah.
but in their entire life they never paid even a single coin in zakat.
Right.
Now imagine, how can I forgive the situation under which they died in a state of unbelief? This is what I'm asking Allah,
This the make your own
That-
choice now. Yeah.
forgive them.
Right.
If I can make people, and people have started paying.
Oh, zakat.
People have started paying zakat. For example, World Federation in their website said zakat is accepted. Africa Federation now, zakat accepted.
Sure.
Toronto Jamaat collected 60,000 Canadian dollar
Okay.
in zakat
Right. So at least you have
by 2-3 families
you
only.
have made community more aware of.
Yes,
of
and
this,
when
yeah.
in Canada where I was in the month of August, I gave lectures at 4 sessions
Right.
talking about zakat.
Now, Mohammedbhai, I have got 3 questions. There is this question: with such a vast experience and knowledge of our community that you have, and you have seen first-hand development and evolution of our community to what it is today. In terms of our faith now, we have also evolved. It would be interesting to hear from your observation as a journey of faith in the history of our community. Now, if you can succinctly expand on that.
You know, we have an outlet, social media outlet by the name of Batak. It has got more than 600 members. I'm told 30 to 40 members are ulama.
Right.
And I was bold enough, as I always am, when it comes to matter of Allah, to say that our journey of faith hasn't ended yet. We haven't reached the destination. We haven't seen even the light at the end of the tunnel yet. Because Ya Ali Madad, that is in Ismailis, as a Salaam, Ya Ali Madad is still there in our community. I can see people coming, praying namaz. As they stand up, they say Ya Ali Madad and they stand up during the namaz. What is this? This is worse, because Ismailis did not have Quran. They can be forgiven. We have Quran and we do this. Ilahi Azmul Bala is an outright shirk. do a tawassul, is shirk, because it's not tawassul. It's falsely named as tawassul.
Okay.
This Ziyarat Jamia Kabira, inside there are things which are contrary to the Quran. So the journey has still to go on.
Now, to continue on this subject of faith, it would be interesting to hear your observations on going to this program of the World Federation Madrasa Center of Excellence. Would you like to sort of throw light on that? I mean, this is it's a newly developed sort of syllabus, I believe, concentrating on Quran. Yeah.
First of all, I was surprised that an idea like MCE, Madrasa Center of Excellence, came about. But then I found it was cosmetic. It was just cosmetic. It was sharpening of the tools, how to teach the teachers to teach. But the substance itself, for which tools are applied, is faulty.
Really?
Faulty. Because there are a lot of things in the curriculum, it's not there. Tawheed is not being taught. I gave my example in madrasa. Tawheed was not being taught, only Allah is Ek, one, Allah is one. That's all. It ended that way.
Have you communicated this to World Federation?
Yes, I started.
So inshallah there will be some.
Yes, no, I have started because I found it, I have to discharge my obligation to Allah in the context of Amr bil Maruf and Nahi al Munkar. Even, I said, even this sectarian, this tabarra is against the Quran. The tabarra, the concept of in which we have and attach it as an article of faith of Shia, is outright against the Quran. And I gave the verses of the Quran. Outright. Tabarra. Ahadith, Al-Kafi and Biharul Anwar are the cause for the Muslims to be misunderstood and to be declared kafir, because going by what is there in the Al-Kafi and Bihar, we are not Muslims. And all these are attributed falsely as the saying of Imam, when it was not Imam who said this. So we are the worst animal, we are the worst enemy of Ahl al-Bayt, supposedly to be loving Ahl al-Bayt, then all others whom we think are the enemies. Read my paper.
Well, I will, yeah.
Read. If anybody wants, I can give. It's disastrous spiritually.
I have to ask you the final question, Mohammedbhai, and that given your vast experience in the community work, why did you not take the top leadership like the President of Dar es Salaam Jamaat or Africa Federation or even World Federation, even when in some cases there was no contest? I mean, given your vast experiences like what you have just expressed in the conversation, why didn't you take it? It's unusual.
I loved my akhirat better, much more than the pomp of offices and posts. My akhirat is more important.
Couldn't you, by taking this position, couldn't you have made a difference to the community's betterment?
As I told you, that our journey is still not ended, journey of faith. Now just think, nobody, the majority, nobody thinks that our journey has not ended. And here I take the responsibility as the top leader of the Jamaat or of Africa Federation, and I don't do anything about this journey. How shall I be accountable? How serious is the accountability to my Lord? No. It's Septain, doctor. The position as I see of the way we denigrate our Ahlul Bayt by taking in beliefs, practices, rituals which they never allowed during their time. These are gulat, gurus. And the worst, that our faith has become now a basis of hatred and abuses because of this Safavid empire, the Safavid people, the Safavid rulers who took over Iran and converted all Sunni Iranians into Shias on condition that the new Shia faith is hatred and abuses. And we follow it. I know it's being recorded.
Yes, it is recorded.
But I fear Allah. I knew some little Farsi. There was somebody who came from Iran, and I happened to talk about Safavid. And he said, no, let us not talk it. And he left me.
Why?
Sense of guilt.
Oh, right.
But then, this world, you know, I'll tell you one thing. I have a sort of a litmus test to apply. Anybody who doesn't use his sense, his aql, it means that Allah doesn't like him. Inna sharra dawaba indallahi summun bukmun alladhina hum la ya'qilun. The worst of animal is the one who is deaf and dumb and doesn't use his aql. If you don't use aql, anything goes by. So in order to get our hearts and minds unlocked, Allah says there is a way. Come through the Quran.
Right. So reading of the Quran, not only reading but understanding of the
Quran. It's not read the Quran.
Yeah.
Study the Quran is the slogan.
Yes.
Not Soma Quran.
Yeah.
Yifun the Quran should be the slogan.
Okay, I think that's a very good advice on to end, Mohammedbhai. Thank you very much indeed. It was an interesting interview.
Ahsan.
Thank you.
Jazakallahu khairan.